As historians, we know that the writing of history or biography requires a lot of research. While famous people are usually easier to write about because there's a lot of material to draw from, often there is more effort in researching and writing about the not so famous. In the case of Eddie Plank, the Hall of Fame baseball pitcher from the early 20th century, his major league records are easily viewed on numerous websites and in many books. Some of the local history could also be found on sites like newspapers.com, and some of his genealogical information could be found on sites like ancestry.com. However, uncovering detail about the childhood and the young adult years of Eddie Plank, the years before he was famous, requires quite a bit of work. Fortunately, the Adams County Historical Society of Gettysburg, Pennsylvania has proven to be very helpful. Gettysburg was Eddie Plank's hometown. In fact, his nickname was Gettysburg Eddie. Inside here, there are Eddie Plank and Plank family folders in which there were several helpful news clippings, which are the basis of this presentation. According to the 1880 census, Eddie Plank, 4 years of age, lived on this farm in Strabane Township, a few miles north of Gettysburg. His father, David, was a farmer and also ran for minor political offices over the years. His mother, Martha McCreary Plank, was keeping house. David was the son of John George Plank Jr., who had a farm on the west side of Gettysburg that was overrun by the Confederates on the first day of the Great Battle in 1863. The family was impacted by the war, and thus David did not continue the old family farm, but rather purchased a different one. This property, before which I am standing, along Keller Road near the old Harrisburg Road. The barn is original to the period, but the tract of houses is a recently built development known as Plank's Field. Somewhere out there in the subdivision is where Eddie and his brothers and his teammates played baseball as young lads. Up this lane known as Keller Road, the Plank boys would walk to school. A few tenths of a mile down this lane was the Good Intent one-room schoolhouse. At the time of Eddie's attendance in the 1890s, Robert King Major was the schoolmaster. Major's interests went beyond the books as he started a baseball team comprised of current and former students and himself. By August 1895, when Eddie was 19 going on 20, the first news account mentioning Eddie and the Good Intent team was published in the local paper. It said, "A game of 5 innings was played on last Friday between the Good Intent and Hunterstown teams, which resulted in a score of 25-2 in favor of the former. The features of the game were the pitching and catching of the Plank brothers. On last Saturday, a game was played between the Aaronsville, the champions of the South Mountain, and the Good Intent teams. The former won by a narrow margin of 14-13. Fisher, Aaronsville's crack pitcher, was knocked out of the box and forced to retire. The feature of the game was a line catch by Rebert that looked good for 2 bases, and a high fly caught by I. Plank while on a dead run." Good Intent's first away game occurred on July 4th, 1896, when Eddie was nearing his 21st birthday. Robert Major took the team to nearby York Springs, Pennsylvania, about 10 miles north of the Good Intent School. This field, now known as Grice Park, is the most likely location of the game. According to the Gettysburg Compiler newspaper, it was an extraordinary day. Promptly at 1:30 p.m., Grand Marshal G.P. Emmert, with his aides, appeared on the street and proceeded at once to the northern end of Main Street, where they received the Bendersville Band. The band was then escorted to the Central Hotel, and after a delay of only a few moments, the line was formed to proceed to the ball field as follows: Grand Marshal and 6 aides on horses, Bendersville Band, the Good Intent Baseball Club, the York Springs Baseball Club, followed by a large crowd of people. The procession moved to Plank's Park, where the Good Intent team was to cross bats with R9. Never in the history of York Springs was there so much interest taken in a game of ball as this one, and we are glad to say that none were sorry that they were here. The Good Intent team had to go for the first time since they were organized. Our boy pitcher was too much for them, they getting only 3 hits off of him. To make a long story short, our boys had the ball from the start and outplayed them in every point. Thus, Eddie Plank didn't win every game. One of the more legendary games mentioned in the local papers was one involving Eddie Plank when he was pitching for the Gettysburg Town team against McSherrystown for a regional championship. I'm at the mound of the old ball field in McSherrystown, 12 miles east of Gettysburg. It is from here that Eddie, on July 20th, 1899, struck out 16 batters en route to shutting out McSherrystown 16-0. The headline said, "A mighty baseball pitcher. Plank, the Gettysburg twirler, struck out 16 local players." Eddie's performance was summed up as follows in the Gettysburg Times. Of the 29 batsmen who faced Plank, only one reached third base, and only two reached second base. 3 hits, 2 of which were scratches, were all the home club secured. There was only 1 fly to the outfield. 16 of 29 were retired on strikes. 1 was given his base on balls, 1 was hit by a pitch, and the remainder were retired by the infielders, with the exception of the 1 fly to the outfield. Accounts of this game grew over the years and were embellished. It's interesting to read the various clippings at the Historical Society with the later accounts. Amazingly, Eddie's strikeout count climbed higher and higher as time passed. During his major league career, Eddie Plank was often referred to as the college boy from Gettysburg College. These accounts sometimes mention the great Christy Matheson, who played for Bucknell College against Gettysburg College on occasion. These two greats faced each other in 2 World Series, Eddie getting the best of Christy in 1913. The papers loved to spin the yarn about the two having battled in college years prior and were now facing each other again. This was not true. It is the local records that proved helpful in discerning which games Eddie pitched for at Gettysburg College. It turns out Christy Matheson had turned professional months before Eddie played at the college in 1899 and 1900. Another interesting fact is that Eddie never attended the college. He was a student at the preparatory school that was on campus. Apparently, he was not strong enough academically to enroll. Regardless, he was allowed to pitch for the team and made a name for himself. Connie Mack learned of Eddie Plank through the brother of Frank Foreman, who had briefly coached for Gettysburg College. Mack, who owned the Philadelphia Athletics in the New American League, signed young Plank to a contract for the 1901 season. The rest was history. While the local historical society has unique records about Eddie Plank and the Plank family, a local tavern honors him in a different way. While a for-profit operation, the sports bar known as Gettysburg Eddie's honors the great left-hander with a baseball-themed decor that includes many large photographs of Plank. Over the years, the Plank story has been drowned out by the interest in the Gettysburg battlefield. Now the thousands of visitors who come to the town every year to honor the events of the Civil War have another place of respite for a good meal and a pint. Many are surprised to learn there's more to Gettysburg than the events of July 1863. After Eddie retired from baseball, he became involved in the automotive business with his brother Ira. The two purchased a garage and auto dealership on what is now Route 30 in downtown Gettysburg. Eddie ran this business for about 5 years before selling it. He also enjoyed being an amateur tour guide at the Gettysburg battlefield and once took Connie Mack on such a tour. With his baseball money, Eddie built a house in downtown Gettysburg. It is here that he and his wife Anna Cora Myers settled at the end of his career and into his retirement. The two had a son, Eddie Plank Jr. In 1926, when Eddie was only 50 years old, he suffered a stroke that paralyzed his left side. Incredibly, the great left-hander who won over 300 baseball games was unable to move his prized arm or his leg. He quickly and quietly succumbed. Eddie's funeral was a grand affair with many out-of-town dignitaries and baseball players attending. It is here at Evergreen Cemetery, adjacent to the Gettysburg National Cemetery where Lincoln gave his Gettysburg address, that Eddie Plank and his wife are buried. Without organizations like the Adams County Historical Society, it would have been very difficult, if not impossible, to assemble a narrative about the life of Eddie Plank. He never wrote a biography, and the family had little in the way of history. Thus, it was necessary to do the research and piece together the life of this great ball player, uncovering details about his early years before he was famous and the quiet years after he retired. In closing, another aspect of public history includes cemeteries. While often the records are limited to mortality information, the location of the graves and tombstones can also tell a piece of the story.
Of course, it is also an opportunity to pay respects to a great Major League Baseball player who died nearly 100 years ago.